On Play It Forward here today with Akanksha. Hold on, I screwed it up. I had it in the beginning. Akanksha Cruczynski.
Yes.
Akanksha Cruczynski, and lovely filmmaker. You'll tell us more about your background because it sounds like it's pretty diverse. Or sounds like there's some Russian in there as well.
Well, there's no Russian, even though it sounds
Yeah.
like it.
Okay.
I am originally from India. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and I moved to the States when I was 17. And I moved here to study physics at the time. But currently, I'm a filmmaker. I just completed my MFA in directing, and I'm here to talk about my film. Thank you for having me.
We thank you. Akanksha, you were nominated by Jim Hemphill, who created a feature. He was on the show earlier with The Trouble with Truth. So
right.
Props to Jim. Thank you, Jim. And you've got a film that we're going to talk about called Natural Selection. And it's pretty funny. I actually laughed out loud.
Really?
Yeah, it happened. I don't do that. Typically, I'm always like, yeah, but I laughed out loud and it was cute, very funny. And you're working on another film called Close Ties to Home Country, which we will post with this, so people will have a chance to check that out. But Natural Selection. So first question for Piff is why? What's the passion behind this film? You could have done a million things. Why did you do this?
Thank you for asking. So I actually had this project sort of like in conception since 2013. I did like
a 7 or something.
I'm sorry?
You were like 7 at the time, or?
Oh gosh, I wish. No, I was in college, and we had to do like you do like your culmination thesis project or whatever, and it's just a little short film about my move to my move to America. This overexcited, enthusiastic, naive person moving to America, wanting to become a comedian and landing in Trump's America. Just to give people an idea about what this project is about, but. Making it because so I'd always wanted to make it, and then last January my apartment flooded, and it was just kind of like one of those, like it was like over New Year's Eve, and I was like, oh God, like I'm so Chicago winters are awful. The apartment flood was just messing with my life, and I was like, I need a distraction, so I'm in grad school, so you have a lot of resources available to you. So I was like, I'm just gonna do my independent project that I've always wanted to do, and that's why I made it, which is probably an unconventional answer, but
no, that's cool. I mean, it makes sense. You had a thesis. It was sitting on your shelf. This is about your life recently. I mean, Trump's America, was it 3 years ago you came to the country?
I came to the country when I was 17. So it's kind of fictionalized. But yeah, the landing in Trump's America was kind of more contemporary.
I see. Okay. So you kind of revved it up a little, fast forward. Okay. And yeah, it makes sense. And you're doing your MFA, and you got film gear and people, so you just shot it.
Exactly. That's exactly what we did.
All right, cool. And I guess I mean, the deeper question in terms of why is like those are all like the mechanics of it, but I guess most filmmakers make a film about their experience, right? At least on the show that I've been interviewing, it's and I think most in general, you have to have some passionate tied to the material, and have to know it in an intimate way. But why are you doing it? Why do you want to make a film about your life and make it either a comedy or drama or whatever? Like, what are you getting out of it?
So this is great. So I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and growing up there as a young girl is kind of just like there's very limited things that you can do. Like literally physically, you can't really spend time outdoors. You can't. So I grew up on movies.
Did you wear the whole thing?
I did. From the age of 9, I had to start wearing the whole thing. I actually made a short film. I'm sorry. It's called an abaya, and then the top part is called a hijab. The part on your face is called a niqab. So there's like different parts, moving parts. Yeah. But I actually made a short film about literally, a young girl having to wear that for the first time and being like, this isn't my culture. Why do I have to embrace it? And so there was only a few things I could do. So I grew up kind of on movies from Bollywood and movies from the West and TV shows, and it was always just like a way for, I always saw it as a way to like have cultures sort of communicate with each other, and to express realities that are so different from that whatever you know. And so I grew up just obsessed with movies, and that just kind of, I feel like you're so informed by what you grow up doing, and there's no way not to be. And I just saw it as like an opportunity to tell these stories of from a diverse point of view, really, from like a point of view that's very it comes from a different landscape, and is trying to fit that in this landscape. And that was where it comes from. Personal storytelling has kind of always been my jam.
Mm-hmm. Well, you said something that really rings eloquent, which is cultures communicating with each other, and to mine the value in that. I would press you, like, what do you think the value in that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think sorry, did you ask me a question?
Yeah, that was the question. What do you think the value of culture communication is?
Oh, I think it's so important. Like, it's, I mean, that's how like, I think, not to sound kind of just like, I don't know. I think that.
Do it sound that way, because if people judge you, that's their deal, right?
Well, it's just like, I think that's where like things like hate begin, where it's like, if you don't, if you're constantly othering and not trying to like put yourself in somebody else's shoes and see things from, or broaden your perspective, that's where alt starts. And that's where, and that's one, I really think that that's the root of the political climate we live in right now, is just about not understanding each other and not wanting to, and it sucks.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, I think that's like a strong through line in the nature of storytelling. I mean, that's, putting yourself in a story that you may not be familiar with.
Right. Storytelling has an evolutionary purpose. Like, we've been telling stories, since we have been on this, since we've been able to use language, and maybe even before. And
probably since the invention of the fire.
I feel like probably since then, because that's the first story, right? that got told. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, I just think that it's so important. Especially like, just, when I was in undergrad, I would only write stories about like white people and like whiteness, even though I have no experience of whiteness. I just have an experience of like what wanting to be that looked like, growing up thinking that white people were the only people who had access to freedom or whatever.
But to clarify that, it's white, like, when you say white, it's sort of like conventional, maybe American European. I mean, if you were walking down the street, I'd be like, oh, you're white. Yeah,
that's exactly what I mean. I think it has like a meaning in terms of like socially what that means, and financially what that means, and like in terms of your class, like what I grew up consuming was upper middle class suburban whiteness in America, and I really thought
freely distributed in Saudi Arabia.
That's a great question. So basically we saw things that had been like syndicated that were like 20 years before. So I grew up on shows like I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched, Who's the Boss, and Different Strokes, and so the 60s and then the 80s, but this was actually the 90s. It wasn't contemporary pop culture. It was like it was like 20 years past.
2 generations.
Right, but it is distributed in the sense that it was on. You have to buy like a cable box or whatever, and then you have like channels and stuff. But there weren't like movie theaters were outlawed, and only recently did they have their first movie theater open up, and the only movie they screened was the Emoji Movie, which I guess is because emojis, I don't know, are unfiltered. I don't know what that's about, but yeah, you had to like go to like, so you had these little Indian stores where you get groceries and then you get like VHS tapes.
So Indian stores in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, this was in Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
Okay, so you have like a whole Indian community in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and Indian communities I think exist everywhere. So yeah, we had a strong Indian community there, and that's how I got to watch, Rushmore. And
I see. So you would go into these Indian movies and buy bootleg American films?
Bootleg VHS tapes.
VHS
yes.
tapes. Huh, far out.
It was always awful and unwatchable, but we got by.
Yeah. And so to give people some perspective on Saudi Arabia, I have, very little knowledge of it, other than, it's a contending power with America, and it's not a friendly power. And there's as far as I understand, funds groups like Hamas and various other and I mean, not even revolutionary, but I guess you would say terrorist groups, right? They're described as terrorist groups. And, I see you have a face there, and please go into that by all means. I'll give you the space to do that. But what I really was going to say is that, I have a friend from Saudi Arabia, and he told me how there's public beheadings.
Yeah, there are public beheadings. I saw one when I was 9 years old.
Now that's fucking crazy.
Yep.
So most people don't probably know that about Saudi Arabia. And I think that gives you like a wide-eyed, holy shit, that's where you're coming from.
Absolutely. They have this, it's a square in the, it literally translates to Chop Square, which sounds like the name of a restaurant. You get like
appropriately if that's titled.
It's complete. I mean, I think back to it sometimes and I'm just like, was that a fever dream that was like 13 years long that I just had? It doesn't feel real at all. And so, yeah, they have on every Friday, they have public beheadings there. And it's supposed to like, and the crowd is always cheering and celebrating. Yeah, it's messed up. But their ideology behind that, I guess, is that it's supposed to discourage crime. So like,
and this is for like people like homosexuals.
Yes. So any transgressions, you get like strikes where, so there's like religious police that kind of monitor the landscape. And every time that they show up, you're supposed to be terrified, and you are. I mean, they could put you in for anything. So you get these strikes. I think you get like up to three, and then you are put in jail. And they could be for anything. They could be for a little bit of your ankle showing, or like a little bit of, you talking on the phone and in a loud fashion or whatever. If you're a woman, they could, you really have to. And it's really, it's just fucked up, because I remember the first time that one of these, they're called mutawas, one of these men sort of like accosted my father. I was 9 years old, and what it was for was I was wearing shorts, and he was like, she's, way too like grown up to be like showing her bare legs or whatever. And I was like, I'm 9. And that's when I had to start wearing the full body cloak. And especially because it's not a culture that was mine, like I felt particularly like enraged by the fact that it was like, oh, like I have to do all these things and I don't even believe in any of this. But yeah, the public beheadings, I think that they behead, I can't remember what the list of crimes is, but there's also like, you could have like a limb cut off, or like a couple. So it's and then there's like
bad.
You'll live.
Right, you'll live. Put a Band-Aid on it. You go.
Oh my gosh.
Huh.
Yeah, it's
insane.
It's definitely it feels like something from a different era, but this is still happening in present day.
So did you want to say anything about the other stuff that I referenced in terms of terrorist groups and support and anti-America kind of thing, or is that like whatever?
I don't really know. I don't keep up to date with what's happening there. We left in 2003. Shortly after 9/11 happened, things kind of went, things were getting really stressful. So we moved back into early 2003, and I kind of have like, I don't keep up with the news. I think out of like, just like, oh, that time's done. I don't have to do that ever again.
Sure.
So I don't know much about what they're up to in terms of their terrorist activity.
Cool.
But, yeah.
Cool. Just thought if you had any strong feelings, I certainly wanted you to vent them or mention them in response to what I said. So moving on,
yes.
The meaning of your film, Natural Selection. You titled it Natural Selection, interestingly enough, and I have not put two and two together yet. How the title, which is super critical, with all works of art, fits into the actual artwork. How does that fit in? And the question is, kind of with that kind of runway in terms of the title, what do you think the film means?
Thank you for asking me that. I'm excited to be able to talk about that because my writing partner, he was always like, well, this sounds like it's a documentary about like Darwinism. And the title is, I think it's important to me because for me it has a very clear meaning, but I obviously, that's not, I was always fascinated by the idea of like, the survival of the fittest or whatever. And the film is supposed to showcase like how, this person moves to this different land and thinks that she can thrive there because she's she's fit, ready to do it. And how that's not necessarily enough. There's like other things that are going to show up no matter where you are. And I think the title is it's more something that's personal. Like I just love I just love Darwin, and I loved I really embraced that, like that theory, his origin of species theory. So I sound like such a nerd, but I really embraced it growing up because I was like, like this just proves that you don't have to be you don't have to be your circumstances. You just have to like be whatever can outlast them and be strong and be. So it's a very
That's cool.
getting a little like
slow down a second.
but
You said something really profound, right? We're going to quote you on that when we do this. You don't have to be your circumstances. You can
be whatever outlasts them, is what I said.
outlast them. Yeah, whatever outlasts them.
Right. Yes. I mean, I think it's a very sappy reading into what was definitely like a scientific theory. But I actually have a series that I'm developing and trying to pitch that is called Natural Selection. Again, based on a person who doesn't want to be political but is thrown into a political world, and is someone who's a person of color, which inherently kind of makes you political today. So. Yeah, I'm saying a lot of lofty things, but
no. I mean, this is the point of the show, right? This is the point of the show to like not talk about like, oh, did you get your film in Tribeca or whatever, and talk about like art, and culture. So it's not lofty. I mean, it's just not really often talked about, I think. So I mean, you said some interesting things, right? I mean, outlast them. I don't think it's sappy. I mean, it's certainly kind of a progressive, like, resilient attitude, right? That people should embrace. Like everybody is born into some circumstances that are painful, right? And you have to overcome them. So, I think that's what you're saying. Regarding the political thing, if you're black, like you're automatically political. I think it's a matter of, perspective. If you think that, as a black person or a white person or whatever, then that's probably the case. And certainly depending on how you're culturally treated, that's certainly maybe what you're really saying is that you're more likely to be treated in a political fashion. So, interesting, all very cool. I mean, one of the things is like in the film Natural Selection, and like talking to you now, nobody would ever know you grew up in Saudi Arabia and you're from India. I mean, you speak like a perfect American, modern contemporary vernacular. So it's like that. And then in the film, I guess, you're saying, everything that happens to you in the film, aside from your name, which is really very funny. You have some really very funny moments around that, that I laughed out loud at, that are great. It's like a girl moving to the big city trying to make it. I mean, everybody can relate, what I mean? Whether you're coming from Saudi Arabia or India, the way you pretty much have it, you got an overprotective mom and she's, so it's very relatable for Americans. So in that sense, I guess, going back to the question of what do you think it means, what do you think it means?
thank you. That's a lot of compliments you threw in there that I'm very grateful for. What do I think it means? I think this was a way for me this is, you know, I think that filmmaking is selfish and all art is selfish, but this for me was an exercise in trying to process something that happened. My mom literally did call the cops on me when I wasn't answering the phone one night, and you know, 3 policemen showed up at my apartment at 3 a.m. and it was ridiculous. It was funny. This was before this was pre-Trump, so it wasn't stressful, and it was pre-Black Lives Matter, which I guess I don't even know what that means, because you know, black men have always been being killed by the police, but it was a stupid funny story, but it was also like, oh my god, like my mom is fucking nuts. And I've since made like 6 or 7 short films, but they've all been like little anecdotes from life. And I feel like every time I make one, I'm like, oh, I processed that, not just in therapy.
Right.
So I think filmmaking is, for me, it is completely like just a way to live, a way to just like process the shit that happens that I don't know where to put or what to do with. I think that there is you know, every filmmaker has to be very conscious of their audience and trying to meet them at a, you know, halfway and trying to do things and trying to build your audience. But so far I've definitely been doing the thing where it's like, I'm doing what I want to do, and then the audience they can enjoy it or not.
You know, does that selfish theory art come from Ayn Rand, or just kind of yourself or somebody else, whatever?
It doesn't come from Ayn Rand, she scares me, so I don't. It just comes from myself. I think it just comes from like, also just being Indian and like having had to make some like sacrifices in terms of the career I chose, and like that being really outlandish to most people from my community, and my family. Like they're like, oh,
become a computer scientist.
Exactly. And I did physics for like 4 or 5 years in my life, and that was exactly and so then there's like, oh, like, what are you gonna do? Like, no, what are you gonna do? And you know, there are things that I'm going to do, but it's kind of they're just like, it's because Indians are very family oriented. I think that's a generalization I can make fair. And so there's like an inherent selfishness, I feel like, just transposed over to me from my community.
You know, to drive a little further into the meaning thing, I totally relate with a, you know, mom, overprotective, Jewish, Russian Jewish background. You know, I think that's like the sort of a stamp that they've had. Oh, being worried is like how you show love. That's a way to do that. But you know, what's that? We're gonna say something?
No, I was just saying, absolutely. That's their love language. Fear and worry.
Yeah, fear and worry, right? It's wonderful. But you know, I try not, like, I think like it's kind of cheesy to say I'm an artist, you know, it just kind of feels, you know, yucky or some way. But let's just say we are, right? Let's just say there's no kind of cultural judgment around that we've been, you know, or that I've at least kind of espoused or whatever. So as an artist, you know, when I make shit, I tend not to have any intention, really. And then I put it out there and I have like some sort of vision, you know, some direction, right? And I think it's common for artists and filmmakers and, you know, writers and painters, whatever. You have some sort of like drive or vision, and then you sort of follow that. And the end of that, maybe you set off kind of with some idea, and this idea of playing with something, or even a meaningful path that you thought you were going to take. And then at the end of that process, you're done, right? At some point. And with film and, you know, right, whatever, it's, you know, like, you know, you got to do the color and the stabilization, all that bullshit. So at some point you're done and you look at it with hindsight. And then whatever that insight you thought you had into whatever thing it is, now it's hindsight. And the meaning can often change and shift. And so you look back on it and you're like, oh, that's what it means to me now, you know? And so, you know, it starts off about, okay, I'm going to make this funny movie about myself coming to America, and I've got all this material, and I can throw in a couple funny jokes in there, and, you know, I'll make it about these like Bohemian, like Americans that, you know, whatever, stereotypical, and a little French with that last scene. And so, you have that whole like kind of soup that you make. But then at the end of it, and maybe you haven't had you're still doing shit with the film, right? It hasn't been a year. But then in the end of it, you're like, and it's very cathartic, as you say, and I think it's, a very common experience for people who make art. Then you like look at it and you're like, oh, I didn't know that. There's something in it I didn't know. And this takes us to the last question, which is like, what did you learn? So what do you think of that?
I think that's so. Thank you for sharing that, because I think I haven't really figured that out yet, and I'm wondering if it's because I haven't screened this film. I've screened it a couple times to the public, and it's been small screenings, but I haven't really got a sense of, and I don't know if that's fair to say, because do I figure out the meaning when they when they watch it and laugh at it or don't laugh at it? No. I think that's a really good question, because and I'm just going back to your last question, really.
Yeah.
Because I've made a few shorts now, and I don't know that I've ever really, after having watched them, over and over and over again, felt like, okay, I understand what this is about. I think it has always just been like, oh, yes, like, okay, well, that's, the stress of making it and of completing it and so on and so forth has kept me so bogged down that it hasn't really hit yet. And so now I'm going to be thinking about that more, which
Cool.
I'm excited to do, because, yeah.
Well, what do you think of these apples? You got a chick coming to America, right, who wants to fit in and be loved, right? What's comedy? I mean, people are laughing at you. You're on stage. I mean, fantastic, right? Who doesn't want to do that? And that's like this kind of like love me thing, right? I mean, acting to a certain degree could be said to be that. And you were talking about the selfishness of art, right? Of course not, I don't want to say that's everything, right? But so you have this chick, young girl, woman, and she wants to fit into this culture. She wants to be loved. She has like that hand that's pulling her back in time to the role of her mom. And then you have this kind of like confusion of acclamation, and at the same time you're dealing with these challenges through your comedy, right? That's how you're dealing. That's what comedy is, right? How do you deal with, you can either laugh or cry, right? So you're laughing, and that's kind of a survival, right? That's survival. And at the end of your film, you have an interesting shot, right? Because even though, what do you have? You got 4 people in bed together.
Yeah.
Right? And what does that mean?
What does that mean? I think it means, okay, well, I made it, and I'm here. Here I am amidst exactly where I wanted to be. And right. it doesn't look or feel like I imagined it would at all. And I have to live with that now.
But you succeeded. You succeeded. You acclimated.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that these are questions I don't end up thinking about a lot, because I have screened the film, to a few different audiences, like audiences that are like primarily white, and then my friends of color, and they're like, "Akanksha, you made a film for white people," and I'm just like, okay, well, I made what I know. And one of the criticisms I got was from a Black friend of mine. He was like, this woman that you've depicted is such a stereotypical woman of color. And I was like, how can it be a stereotype? It's literally me. Like, I am a living human, body. But I think that for that project, and then for the project that I'm working on right now, I really am trying to convey this. There is a league of human beings that really try very hard to fit into cultures that aren't theirs, and there's like some denial of like my own Indianness going on there, but it's because of trauma and rooted in like a whole bunch of cultural baggage. And then there's like that aspect of like, no, you're never going to fully belong here. You're never really going to fully fit in here. And coming to like realize that and like accept it and like moving onward from there is my work's kind of thesis. Sweet. And because I really do think that there is like a strong network of not just Americans or of just like people from, you know, from different worlds that are, I mean, what does it mean to be an immigrant, right? Like you're, and what does it mean to be an expat or whatever? You're trying to, yeah, you're taking on a new country's finances and, you know, all the logistical stuff, but you're also making all these choices that say something about who you think you are. And you know, I really think that the particular instance of like a person who really wants to be something they're not and is willing to like sacrifice everything they know to do it, and then finds out that what they were trying to be is not really all that cracked up to be, or it's never going to happen. That's really what the thesis of all of my work really is. So, because that's kind of been my life's journey. Like, it's been a lot of years of like trying to be something that I really wasn't, and then figuring out that that whole thing is so complicated, and it's really not as simple, especially in Trump's America today, where the, you know, racism has become so it's just open now, you know, and it wasn't when I moved here. It wasn't when I moved here in 2008. It was way more covert. And now it's like, well, we can just do this and it's fine.
Yeah. Akanksha Cruczynski.
That's right.
Self and definition and the identity of selfhood through comedy and through your other works. You particularly do comedy, is that right?
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Comedy. Yes. Coping mechanism.
What's that?
It's a coping mechanism, as you said.
Akanksha, hey, we all need it. We all cope, and we all need it. We all need to laugh and cry.
I agree with that.
Akanksha, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Great work.
Talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome very much. It was a pleasure and an honor to have you on the show and share yourself and get to know you better. And thanks for sharing yourself to the audience. And it's brave work, and I know you will keep it up. So till next time, guys, later. And Akanksha Cruczynski, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, let me press the button off. Stop. Stop.